Tuscany on an autumn afternoon was bathed in golden sunlight that flowed like honey over rolling green hills, where vineyards stretched wide like a living painting. The Casa Divino estate, with its aged stone walls and red-tiled roof, stood at the heart of a lavish wedding. White silk ribbons fluttered in the breeze, silver-lit banquet tables shimmered, and laughter echoed from guests dressed in glamorous attire. The scent of lavender mingled with Tuscan wine, creating an atmosphere that was both romantic and quietly unsettling. Lena Carter, 27, a young jewelry designer, stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, her hands slightly trembling as she adjusted her white silk gown. The dress, intricately embroidered like moonlight, was a gift from her mother, Karen. Lena never dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, but her heart was pounding nonetheless. She was about to marry Kyle, her boyfriend of 4 years, who promised stability even if their love lacked a certain spark. But something felt off. Kyle hadn't arrived. He had texted that morning saying his flight from New York was delayed due to a storm. His voice hurried over the phone. "I'll make it in time, Lena. Everything's arranged. Just follow the planner's instructions." Lena frowned at the simple engagement ring on her finger. Kyle was always reliable, but his absence now unnerved her. "He'll be here," she whispered to herself, trying to push away the sinking feeling in her chest. Outside, violins sang in the distance, and the wedding planner, a petite Italian woman named Julia, knocked urgently on the door. "Signorina Carter, we must begin. Mrs. Sophia Moretti is waiting." Her voice held a trace of tension, like she feared offending a powerful figure. Lena nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped out, unaware she was walking straight into a trap. The ceremony followed traditional Italian customs, with elaborate rituals Lena only vaguely understood through a translator. She was led to a small table draped in white silk, where a tall man in a black suit waited. He had neatly combed dark hair and deep brown eyes that reflected a stern intensity. He gave her a faint smile, though it seemed forced, as if he wasn't at ease either. Lena glanced at her mother, Karen, who stood nearby looking puzzled. "Is that the groom?" Lena whispered. Karen shrugged. "Kyle said he sent someone to stand in for him since his flight was delayed. Must be a family representative." Lena wanted to ask more, but Julia rushed things along. The translator, an elderly man with a gravelly voice, read the vows in Italian, then translated them into English. Lena repeated them, feeling as if she were acting in a play. The man across from her replied in Italian, his voice deep and firm, though a flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes. When it came time to sign the marriage certificate, Lena paused. The document was in Italian, and the translator quickly explained, "This is just a formality, Miss Carter. Sign here to complete the ceremony." Under the weight of Julia's stare and the applause of the crowd, Lena signed, never realizing that signature had just changed her life. The man also signed slowly, as if struggling with something inside. The applause rose around them, but Lena felt only a chill run through her. The reception was held in a grand hall filled with ancient murals and glittering chandeliers. Lena tried to blend in, but her eyes kept darting to her phone. Kyle remained silent. In growing panic, she called him, once, twice, then a third time, but only reached his voicemail. She texted him nonstop. "Kyle, where are you? What's going on? Call me back now." No response. Her mother, tipsy from wine, pulled her onto the dance floor, but Lena pulled away and rushed to a quiet corner to try again. Still nothing. She wove through the crowd and accidentally bumped into the man in the black suit, the so-called stand-in groom. He stood alone holding a glass of wine, his eyes fixed on her with curiosity. "Sorry," Lena said awkwardly. "Thank you for helping today. Kyle should be here soon." The man furrowed his brow and set down his glass. His voice was low, his English flawless but tinged with an Italian accent. "Helping? What are you talking about, Signorina Carter?" Lena blinked, a cold chill crawling down her spine. "Aren't you the one Kyle sent to stand in for him at the wedding?" He shook his head, his expression shifting from curious to stunned. "Stand in? I'm Matteo Moretti. My mother, Sophia, said you were my bride. I thought you knew." He paused and pulled a copy of the marriage certificate from his jacket. Lena Carter's name was written next to Matteo Moretti's. along with both of their signatures. We're legally married, according to this. Lena laughed, thinking it was some absurd joke, but the laughter faded as she snatched the paper. The truth hit her like a knife. No, this can't be. I'm marrying Kyle, not you, she nearly shouted, drawing glances from nearby guests. She dug through her phone, checking her messages, and at that moment, a new message from Kyle appeared. Lena, I'm sorry. The company is going bankrupt. I needed the Moretti contract. Stay in Italy a few months. I'll explain later. Lena felt the world spin. Kyle, what have you done? She whispered, her hands trembling. She looked up at Matteo, her voice shaking. Did you know that I wasn't supposed to be your bride? Matteo stared at her, confusion written across his face. No, I didn't know. My mother told me you were Lena Carter, the bride selected to secure the Moretti inheritance. I didn't want this, but she forced me. He clenched his glass, his voice growing quieter. Are you saying you had no idea I was the groom? Lena shook her head, tears brimming. Kyle is my boyfriend. He said his flight was delayed and everything was already taken care of. She held up her phone, showing Matteo Kyle's message. He used me for his company. Matteo read the message, his eyes darkening. My mother and that man, they orchestrated this. He paused, his voice turning cold. If what you're saying is true, we've both been deceived. But now, under the Moretti family contract, we must live as husband and wife for 6 months to fulfill the inheritance clause. Otherwise, my mother will make our lives hell. Lena clutched her phone, hands shaking. Somewhere in the distance, the music played on, but her world had just collapsed. She hadn't just married the wrong man. She and Matteo had been manipulated by the people they trusted most, now trapped in a scheme neither of them saw coming. The morning after the wedding, golden Tuscan sunlight filtered through white silk curtains, casting warm rays across the marble floor of the Moretti estate. Lena woke up in a strange bed, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. The marriage certificate lay on the nightstand, a cruel reminder that she was now married to Matteo Moretti, a man she had met only hours ago, caught in a scheme neither of them had seen coming. Kyle's last message still echoed in her mind. Lena, I'm sorry. My company's about to go under. I needed the Moretti contract. Stay in Italy for a few months. I'll explain later. Clutching her phone, Lena had the overwhelming urge to call Kyle again, to scream at him for betraying her. But she stopped herself and tossed the phone onto the bed. Not worth it, she muttered. Kyle had chosen his company over her, and now she had to deal with the consequences. 6 months of living as Matteo's wife to fulfill the Moretti inheritance clause, or face Sophia's wrath. She stood up and looked around the grand room, adorned with antique paintings and polished wooden furniture. The Moretti villa was as beautiful as a museum, yet it made Lena feel like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. She threw on a t-shirt and jeans, determined to find Matteo and figure things out. If they were both victims, surely they could find a way out of this farce. She found Matteo in the grand dining room, where a breakfast spread had been laid out, fresh focaccia, soft cheeses, and rich espresso. He sat at the head of the table, dressed in a crisp white shirt and gray vest, reading an Italian newspaper. His dark hair was neatly combed, but his deep brown eyes looked tired, as if he, too, had slept poorly after yesterday's debacle. Good morning, Lena, Matteo said without looking up, his voice low and calm. Would you like some coffee? Lena crossed her arms, standing in the doorway. No, thanks. I want to talk about this. How do we get out of your mother's ridiculous contract? Matteo folded the newspaper and looked at her with a mix of curiosity and seriousness. It's not that simple, Lena. My mother, Sophia, controls the family estate. The contract isn't a joke. It requires us to live as husband and wife for 6 months, under the supervision of the family's attorney. If we break it, I lose my inheritance, and you, he paused, frowning. I don't know what Kyle promised you, but my mother won't let you walk away easily. Lena let out a bitter laugh and sat down across from him. Kyle didn't promise anything, except betrayal. He needed your mother's money to save his company, and now I'm stuck here. But what about you, Matteo? Why are you dancing to your mother's tune like some puppet? Matteo gripped his coffee cup, a flicker of anger in his eyes, though he quickly composed himself. I'm not a puppet, but the Moretti family has rules. If I want to keep my position, I have to follow them. You don't understand, Lena. I didn't have a choice. Oh, poor you, Lena said sarcastically. So now I have to pretend to be your wife, live in this mansion, and what? Cook, clean, and fake affection in front of the lawyer? Mateo raised an eyebrow, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You cook? I'm not sure the villa would survive a fire. Lena rolled her eyes but couldn't help a faint smile. Glad you're in the mood for jokes. But seriously, Mateo, we need to find a way to void this contract. Mateo sighed, standing and walking to the large window that overlooked the vineyard. I spoke to the lawyer this morning. The contract can't be broken before 6 months unless we want a legal war and to lose everything. The only option is to live together and follow the terms. Lena shot up from her chair, the wood creaking beneath her. Live together? With you? Are you serious? I don't even know you. And I sure as hell don't want to be here. Mateo turned, his expression firm. I don't want this either, Lena. But if we don't go through with it, my mother wins, and Kyle gets what he wants without paying the price. Lena bit her lip, knowing Mateo was right. Kyle had used her, and Sophia had manipulated them both. If she walked away now, she'd have nothing but heartbreak. Fine, she said, her voice hard. 6 months, but I have my own rules. Don't expect me to play the perfect little wife? Mateo nodded, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. I've got rules too. Stay out of my library. Don't destroy the kitchen, and no crossing boundaries. Boundaries, Lena smirked. Don't worry, I have no intention of getting close to you, Moretti. The days that followed at the Moretti estate were filled with humorous, intense clashes between Lena and Mateo. Lena, impulsive and creative, couldn't stand Mateo's strict orderliness. He lived by a rigid schedule, up at 6 a.m., working in his office, dinner at 7 sharp, and not a single item out of place. Lena, on the other hand, turned the kitchen into a disaster zone, trying to cook American-style spaghetti with burnt tomato sauce. Mateo walked in, stared at the smoke rising from the pan, and said only, I told you not to destroy the kitchen. I'm learning to cook, Lena huffed, hands on her flour-covered hips. You can't eat boring food forever. Mateo shook his head, but the corners of his mouth twitched, as if suppressing a smile. Boring? Lena, this is Tuscany. We don't need canned tomato sauce. But she didn't stop there. She brought her jewelry tools into Mateo's private library, a room lined with crimson wood shelves and the scent of old paper. She spread gemstones and metal wire across a table, turning a corner of the library into her studio. When Mateo found out, he froze in the doorway, visibly fuming. Lena, I told you not to touch the library. No one reads in here anyway, she said, not even looking up from the ring she was crafting. I need a creative space. You stay in your office. Let me do my work. Mateo stepped forward, ready to clear the table, but paused when he saw a sketch, a ring inspired by the Tuscan vineyard, with delicate, elegant lines. He furrowed his brow, his tone softer. You made this? Lena nodded, a bit shy. Just a concept. I need something to keep me from going crazy here. Mateo looked at her for a moment, then turned away. Keep your things for now. The lawyer will be checking in by the weekend. That weekend, the Moretti family attorney, Mr. Bianchi, came to the villa to evaluate Lena and Mateo's married life. He was an older man, stern-faced, with gold-rimmed glasses and a thick notebook. Lena and Mateo had to play the part of husband and wife, sitting close on the sofa, answering questions like, have you shared a dinner yet? And any plans for the future? Lena forced a smile, but inside she wanted to scream that it was all a lie. After the interview, Lena pulled Mateo into the vineyard behind the estate, where lush vines stretched into the sunset. We can't keep doing this, she said, tense. I can't stand pretending. And Kyle, he still hasn't called me. Mateo looked at her, his gaze softer than usual. Lena, I know you're hurt, but Kyle doesn't deserve you. As for my mother, I'll deal with her. But right now, we need to work together. Lena shook her head, tears brimming. Work together? With you? You live like a robot, Mateo. I don't belong here. Mateo stepped closer, his voice low but steady. You don't have to belong, but you're stronger than you think. I see it in how you've handled all this, and in your designs." Lena stared at him, stunned by the unexpected kindness in his words. She turned away, hiding her emotions. "Don't try to make me feel better, Moretti. These 6 months are going to be very long." Matteo said nothing, but his eyes followed her as she walked back toward the villa, like he was trying to understand the woman who had just crashed into his life. The following weeks at the Moretti estate passed like a tug-of-war between endurance and unexpected moments. Lena gradually adapted to life in Tuscany. The morning bird song, the aroma of espresso Matteo brewed in the kitchen, and the occasional arguments when she accidentally spilled ink on the antique library rug. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Kyle's final message, his cold apology about the company's bankruptcy, still cut like a knife every time she thought of him. She had stopped calling him, but the betrayal still left her heart aching. Matteo, on the other hand, seemed to have accepted the situation. He spent his days working in his office, meeting with vineyard partners, and only appeared at dinner with a stern face. Yet Lena noticed rare glimpses of the man behind the mask, like when he quietly fixed the bookshelf she had messed up, or when he stood at dusk watching the vineyard, his eyes clouded with something deeper. She began to wonder what made a man like Matteo, intelligent, successful, and undeniably handsome, live like a machine. One afternoon, as Lena was immersed in designing a necklace in the library, the door swung open. A well-dressed older woman with silver hair swept up into a bun stepped in. Her eyes were sharp, just like Matteo's, but her presence radiated a kind of power that made Lena instinctively straighten up. "You must be Lena Carter," the woman said, her voice low and commanding. "Yes," Lena replied, setting down her pencil. "And you are—" "I'm Sophia Moretti," the woman said, her gaze sweeping the room. "Matteo's mother. I'm here to make sure you understand your responsibilities in this arrangement." Lena clenched her fists, forcing back a wave of anger. "Responsibilities? You and Kyle tricked me into this contract. I don't owe you anything." Sophia offered a cold, faint smile. "You're mistaken, Lena. You signed the papers, and now you're part of the Moretti family. If you break the contract, I'll make sure you lose everything. Your reputation, your career, and even your precious boyfriend." "Kyle is no longer my boyfriend," Lena snapped, her voice shaking with fury. "And you can't force me to live like some puppet." Sophia stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You can hate me all you want, but you'll do exactly what the contract requires. Matteo needs this marriage to inherit from his grandfather, and you, Lena, are the key to proving he deserves it." Lena frowned. "Prove? He's your son. What more does he need to prove?" Sophia turned away, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "You'll find out soon enough. But remember, our family lawyer is watching. If you and Matteo don't act like a real couple, everything falls apart." She left the room, leaving Lena stunned, her mind racing with questions. That evening, Lena decided to confront Matteo. She found him in the vineyard, inspecting the grapevines under the moonlight. His sleeves were rolled up, hands dirt-stained, and he looked more grounded than the stiff man she usually saw at dinner. "Matteo," Lena called as she approached, "we need to talk about your mother and this contract." Matteo wiped his hands on a cloth, his gaze cautious. "What did my mother say to you?" "She said I have to act like your real wife, or everything will collapse," Lena said sharply. "And she said you need me to prove something to your grandfather." "What's going on, Matteo?" Matteo sighed and looked out over the vineyard. "Lena, you don't need to know everything. Just follow the contract, and in 6 months you'll be free." "No!" Lena cut him off, stepping in front of him. "I'm done being kept in the dark. Kyle lied to me. Your mother manipulated both of us. If I have to be here, I at least deserve the truth. Why do you need this marriage?" Matteo stayed silent for a moment, his eyes dark with sadness. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "I'm not a biological member of the Moretti family. I was adopted. My grandfather, Don Giovanni, took me in when I was 5, after my parents died in an accident. But to this family, I've always been an outsider. Most of them see me as an unworthy heir." Lena blinked, stunned by his admission. "Adopted? But you carry the Moretti name. You run the wine business. Why don't they see you as family? Mateo's smile was bitter. Because I don't have Moretti blood. My grandfather believes I can take over the estate, but my mother and most of the family don't. They want the inheritance to go to my cousin Luca, who's always viewed me as a threat. This marriage, it's my grandfather's way of testing me. If I can prove I can build a family and live responsibly as a true Moretti, he'll name me his successor. Lena stood in silence, looking at Mateo beneath the moonlight. She had always thought of him as cold, robotic, driven by pride and rules. But now she saw a lonely boy who had always fought to prove his worth. So, I'm part of that test? She asked quietly. Mateo nodded, his expression softening. I don't know why my mother chose you, Lena, but once you signed the papers, my grandfather changed his mind. He thinks you bring something different. He wants us to live like a real married couple, not just on paper to prove I'm worthy. Lena let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. This is insane. I'm not your wife, Mateo. I'm just a girl who got tricked into Kyle and your mother's scheme. Mateo stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. I know, Lena, and I'm sorry you got dragged into this. But I've seen your strength. You don't give up, even when the odds are against you. Lena looked at him, her heart stirring at his rare sincerity. But before she could respond, a voice called from the vineyard gate. Lena! She turned, her heart dropped. Kyle stood there in a wrinkled coat, eyes filled with worry and guilt. Lena, I need to talk to you. I made a mistake, but I can fix this. Lena froze, anger and pain rising like wildfire. Fix it? Kyle, you sold me to the Moretti family to save your company. You think an apology is enough? Kyle stepped forward, his voice trembling. I didn't have a choice, Lena. The company was all I had. But I still love you. Come back to the U.S. with me. We can fight this contract, annul the marriage. Mateo crossed his arms, his voice cold. She's not going anywhere, Kyle. Not because of me, but because she's not your pawn anymore. Lena looked between the two men, her heart torn. Kyle was her past, the man she had trusted, but now his words felt like lies. Mateo was a stranger, yet for the first time, he seemed to understand her pain. Kyle, she said, her voice steady, I'm not going back. Not for you. I need to find myself again, and I'll do that here. Kyle shook his head, eyes desperate. You'll regret this, Lena. This life isn't meant for you. He turned and left, leaving Lena and Mateo in silence. Mateo looked at her, his voice gentle. Are you sure, Lena? She took a deep breath, staring out at the vineyard bathed in moonlight. But for the first time, I want to choose my own fate. Mateo nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Then we'll face my mother, and this whole family, together. Lena gave a faint smile, feeling a small spark of hope. She didn't know what the next 6 months would bring, but for the first time, she knew she wasn't alone. The morning after the unexpected encounter with Kyle, sunlight streamed through the windows of the Moretti villa, but Lena felt a chill deep in her chest. Kyle's words echoed in her mind. Come back to the U.S. with me. We can fight this contract, annul the marriage. She had refused him, insisting she wanted to take control of her own fate. But now as she sat in an armchair in the living room, staring out at the vineyard shimmering with morning dew, doubt crept in. Was she weaving a fantasy in Tuscany, just like Kyle had warned? Or did she truly belong here, in this house filled with the secrets of the Moretti family? Mateo didn't show up for breakfast, an unusual break in his punctual routine. Lena sipped her coffee, wondering if he was avoiding her after last night. When she rejected Kyle, Mateo had been there, his gaze both respectful and distant, as if he didn't want to interfere in her past. But his silence now left her confused. She needed to speak with him, to understand whether they could still cooperate to withstand Sophia and the family contract, or if she was just fooling herself. She stood, determined to find him, but the doorbell rang. Lena frowned and walked to the hallway. The housekeeper, Rosa, had already answered it, and standing at the door was Kyle, now wearing a cleaner coat than yesterday, but still carrying that tense, desperate look in his eyes. Lena, he said, his voice urgent, we need to talk. Alone. Lena crossed her arms, her heart racing. Kyle, I made myself clear last night. I'm not going back with you. Kyle stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes sweeping across the grand entryway. Look at this place, Lena. The antique paintings, the chandeliers, the vineyard. It's beautiful, but it's not real. It's a dream, and you're getting lost in it. I'm your reality. Lena gave a dry laugh, though his words touched a hidden fear. Reality? Kyle, your reality was selling me to the Morettis to save your company. You call that love? Kyle took her hand, his voice shaking. I made a mistake, Lena. I panicked over the business, but I never wanted to lose you. I flew here to fix things. We can sue Matteo and his family for fraud. This contract isn't legal. You were tricked into signing it. Lena yanked her hand away and stepped back. Matteo didn't trick me, Kyle. He's just as much a victim as I am. Your mother-in-law-to-be and you arranged this. Don't pretend you're innocent. Kyle clenched his fists, his eyes flashing with anger. Matteo Moretti, a victim? Lena, he's a rich man living in a villa, running a wine empire. He knew exactly what he was doing. You believe he's innocent just because he says he is? Lena hesitated. She wanted to argue, but Kyle's words planted a seed of doubt. Matteo had claimed he didn't know about Sophia's plan, but he was still the Moretti heir, even if adopted. Was he truly innocent, or just better at hiding his part than Kyle? Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the staircase. Matteo appeared, wearing a white dress shirt and tailored trousers, his expression cold as he looked at Kyle. Kyle, you're not welcome here, Matteo said, his voice low and sharp. Leave before I call security. Kyle gave a bitter laugh and turned to him. Call security or your lawyers to cover up your fraud. Lena deserves the truth. She doesn't belong to you, Moretti. Matteo descended the stairs, never taking his eyes off Kyle. Lena has the right to choose. She chose to stay. You, Kyle, only ever used her. Lena stood between them, feeling torn in two. She looked at Kyle, the man she once loved, the one who promised a future together. But those promises were now hollow. Then she looked at Matteo, the man she never wanted to know, who nonetheless had stood up for her, even though he owed her nothing. Kyle, she said firmly, go. I don't need you to fix anything. I'm staying. Not for Matteo, not for anyone, but for me. Kyle looked at her, his eyes filled with hurt and fury. You'll regret this, Lena. When this Tuscan dream falls apart, don't come running back. He turned and walked out, leaving behind a heavy silence. After Kyle left, Lena felt emotionally drained. She sank onto the sofa, covering her face, trying to hold back tears. Matteo stood in the doorway, watching her quietly, but said nothing. Eventually, he turned to leave, heading toward his office. Matteo, wait, Lena called, standing. We need to talk. Matteo stopped, but didn't turn around. You need time, Lena. I don't want to make things more complicated. Complicated? Lena stepped closer, her voice trembling. Kyle just called you a liar. You say you didn't know about your mother's scheme, but I need the truth. Are you really innocent, or am I just another pawn in your family's game? Matteo turned, pain flickering in his eyes. Lena, I told you the truth. I didn't know you weren't the bride originally planned. My mother forced me into the wedding, and I thought you had agreed. When you showed me Kyle's messages, I was just as shocked as you. Lena searched his eyes for signs of deceit, but saw only sincerity. She sighed and sank back into the chair. I believe you, but I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Kyle was right about one thing. I don't belong here. I just want my life back. Matteo sat across from her, his voice gentler. Lena, you don't have to belong here, but you're stronger than you think. You stood up to Kyle, to my mother, and to this entire contract. That's more than most people could do. Lena gave a weak smile, though her heart still felt heavy. Thank you, Matteo, but I need time to figure things out. Matteo nodded and stood. I understand. I'll give you space. He walked away, but Lena noticed a shift in him. He began to keep his distance, as if afraid to interfere in her world. In the days that followed, Matteo was practically invisible. He left early, worked late, and avoided dining with Lena. She felt the emptiness, not just from Kyle's absence, but from Mateo's too. Once she had seen him as the enemy, but now he had become a strangely important presence in her life. She tried to focus on designing jewelry, but her thoughts kept drifting to his sorrowful eyes when he spoke about being adopted and how fiercely he had defended her against Kyle. One evening, while sketching in the library, Rosa entered with a tray of tea. "Miss Lena," she said gently, "Signor Mateo isn't doing well. He's overworking himself, and I think he's avoiding you." Lena frowned. "Avoiding me? Why?" Rosa gave a sad smile. "He doesn't want to hurt you. He thinks you need space to forget Kyle, but I can tell he cares about you, even if he doesn't say it." Lena sat frozen, her heart stirring. She looked down at the sketch on her desk, a ring inspired by the vineyard, the one she'd started a week ago. Maybe, she thought, it was time she confronted her feelings, not just about Kyle, but about Mateo too, the man she never wanted to know, but who now stirred more curiosity in her than anyone ever had. The days after Kyle's departure were wrapped in an odd silence around the Moretti villa. Lena tried to stay focused on her jewelry designs, but Mateo's absence left her restless. He left before dawn and returned after she was asleep, as if deliberately avoiding her after the incident with Kyle. Rosa, the housekeeper, had been right. Mateo was keeping his distance, perhaps to give Lena space to let go of her past. But Lena realized she missed him, the petty bickering, the rare smiles, the way he quietly fixed the bookshelf she had messed up. One rainy afternoon, Rosa knocked on the library door where Lena was sketching, her face lined with concern. "Miss Lena, Signor Mateo is unwell. He came back from Florence with a high fever. The doctor has seen him, but he needs care." Lena stood, her heart racing. "A fever? Why didn't he say anything?" Rosa sighed. "Signor Mateo doesn't like to trouble anyone, but I think he'll listen to you." Lena nodded, a sense of urgency pulling her down the hallway toward Mateo's master bedroom. The large room overlooked the vineyard, and Mateo lay there on the bed, his face pale and damp with sweat. Lena felt her chest tighten. The man who always seemed so strong now looked impossibly fragile. "Miss Lena," the doctor said, "he has a fever from overexertion and a cold. I've given him medicine, but he needs rest and care. Can you help?" "I'll try," Lena replied, even though she wasn't sure what she was doing. Lena became his reluctant caretaker. She changed the cool towels on his forehead, coaxed him to drink water, and made a bowl of chicken soup, the only dish she knew how to cook without burning it. Mateo drifted in and out of consciousness, but whenever he opened his eyes, they sought her with a dazed look. "Lena," he rasped, "you don't have to do this." "Shut up, Moretti," Lena teased. "If you don't get better, who's going to nag me about the library?" Mateo gave a weak chuckle, and Lena felt something stir inside her chest. She sat beside him, telling silly childhood stories, like the time she ruined her mother's birthday cake by pouring in way too much salt. Mateo let out a rough laugh, and Lena realized she liked seeing him like this. Not the strict heir, but just Mateo. That night, as his fever eased, Mateo reached for her hand, his voice a whisper. "Thank you, Lena. I'm not used to being cared for." Lena blushed but didn't pull away. "Don't get used to it. I'm not a nurse full-time." But when his eyes locked onto hers, a jolt passed through her. After Mateo recovered, something shifted between them. He no longer avoided Lena. Instead, he started joining her for breakfast, even brewing coffee for them both. One afternoon, he pulled her into the kitchen, announcing he'd teach her to make proper Italian pasta. "We can't let you ruin Tuscany's reputation any further," he said, eyes gleaming with amusement. The kitchen became a playground. Lena spilled flour on his shirt, and he retaliated by smearing tomato sauce on her nose. They burst out laughing, and when Lena tried to wipe her face, Mateo suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her close. "You really are a disaster, Lena," he murmured, but his voice was soft. Before she could react, he leaned down and kissed her. It was brief but searing, a spark igniting between them. Lena was stunned, heart pounding, but she didn't pull away. When they finally separated, Mateo flushed and stepped back. "Sorry, I shouldn't have." Lena laughed, trying to mask her own fluster. "Don't apologize, Moretti. Just, next time, give me a warning." She turned to pretend to focus on the pasta, but the kiss lingered on her mind. One morning, Matteo brought her into the vineyard and handed her a small pruning tool. "I want you to learn how to care for them," he said. "It's a Moretti tradition." Lena raised a brow. "Me? With plants? Did you forget the kitchen incident?" Matteo laughed, an open, genuine sound that made her smile. He showed her how to trim the leaves, check the grapes, and spoke of his grandfather, the man who taught him to love the vineyard as a child. Lena listened quietly, realizing Matteo was sharing pieces of his childhood, days spent running between the vines to escape the loneliness of being adopted. That night they sat together on a wooden bench under the moonlight. Matteo gently took her hand. "You know, Lena," he said, his voice low, "I've always felt like I belonged here, even if the family didn't believe it. But with you here, it feels different, lighter." Lena looked at him, warmth blooming in her chest. "I understand, Matteo, and thank you." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and in the quiet moment, Matteo leaned in and kissed her again. This kiss was deeper, more intense, as if they were finally saying what words couldn't. Lena kissed him back, her fingers tangling in his hair, and beneath the moonlight they forgot about the contract, the manipulation, only two hearts searching for each other. Matteo became her muse. Lena designed a ring inspired by him, a silver band etched with vineyard motifs, set with a green gem to match his eyes. She worked late into the night, pouring her emotions into the piece, as if it were her way of telling him everything she couldn't say aloud. When the International Jewelry Exhibition in Florence came around, Lena submitted the ring without telling Matteo. She was so nervous the night before results were announced, she barely slept. But when the email came in, she burst into tears. The ring had won a major award, praised as a piece of emotional brilliance. Lena Carter's name suddenly gained recognition across Europe, and orders began pouring in. She raced out to the vineyard where Matteo was working and shouted, "Matteo! I won! The ring! It won first prize." Matteo dropped his shears, eyes lighting up. "Lena, really? Let me see." She handed him the sketch and explained how the design was inspired by the vineyard, and by him. Matteo stared at the drawing in silence before looking up, his eyes full of emotion. "Lena, this is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." That night, to celebrate, Matteo opened a rare bottle of Moretti wine and invited Lena onto the villa's balcony. Beneath a sky full of stars, they toasted, laughing about everything, from failed pasta attempts to Lena's wildest dreams. The wine flushed her cheeks, and Matteo never took his eyes off her. "You surprise me every day, Lena," he said warmly. Lena smiled and set her glass down. "And you make me feel like I can be anything, Matteo." She stepped closer, rose on her toes, and kissed him. This kiss was different, hungry, passionate, like a dam breaking. Matteo responded, pulling her into his arms, his hands threading through her hair. They stumbled into Matteo's room, lips never parting. That night, beneath the moonlight pouring through the window, Lena and Matteo gave in to a wave of emotion. Each touch, each whisper burned away the walls they had built. Lena felt her heart open, not just with desire, but with something deeper. Matteo, the man she once thought of as an enemy, had become someone she couldn't imagine life without. As dawn crept in, Lena lay in Matteo's arms, her head resting on his chest. "What did we just do, Moretti?" she whispered, half teasing, half nervous. Matteo kissed her forehead, his voice tender. "We just lived our truth, Lena. One night, or maybe more." Lena smiled, knowing her heart already belonged to him, even if the road ahead would still be full of trials. After that passionate night on the balcony of the Moretti villa, Lena and Matteo began living like a real married couple, as if the family contract was merely an excuse for them to fall into love. Every morning, Matteo would wake Lena with a gentle kiss on her forehead, his eyes sparkling as she gave him a sleepy glare. They had breakfast together, Lena teasing Matteo for reading the Italian paper, and he retaliating by smearing jam on her cheek. Sudden hugs in the kitchen, hurried kisses in passing, and longing glances across the dining table filled the villa with warmth. At night, they found each other under the moonlight. One evening after dinner, Matteo took Lena into the vineyard, laying out a blanket between the rows of grapevines so they could lie under the stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and whispered childhood dreams into her ear. Lena responded with a deep kiss, and that night, they melted into each other again, bodies entwined as if they couldn't bear to part. Those passionate nights were proof that, despite how it all began, their hearts now belonged to each other. But Lena couldn't shake her unease. The Moretti family contract, Kyle's betrayal, and the looming shadow of Sophia haunted her. Her career had soared with the award-winning ring inspired by Matteo, but she still wondered, was this Tuscany dream destined to shatter? One afternoon, while Lena was organizing designs in the library, a man walked in, tall, blonde, with a confident smile and cold eyes. "You must be Lena Carter, Matteo's bride, right?" he said mockingly. Lena set down her sketch pad and narrowed her eyes. "I'm Lena, and you are?" "Luca Moretti," he replied, folding his arms. "Matteo's cousin. I must say, I'm surprised how easily you've settled in, playing the role of a real wife." Lena clenched her fists. "If you're talking about the contract, I didn't choose this. I was tricked, just like Matteo." Luca laughed, brushing his fingers over the antique shelves. "Just like Matteo? Oh, Lena, you really are naive. Matteo knew you didn't enter that contract willingly. He signed an agreement with my mother to keep you here for 6 months in exchange for the inheritance, and a hefty payment to your boyfriend. The kisses, the nights, all part of his plan to keep you in line." Lena's heart stopped. "You're lying. Matteo didn't know I was deceived. He's a victim of Sophia, too." Luca raised an eyebrow, eyes gleaming with disdain. "Really? Then why did he sign this before the wedding, agreeing to keep you even if you weren't willing?" He tossed a folder onto the desk. "Read it. The agreement between Matteo and my mother. He knew everything, Lena." Lena opened it. Her eyes scanned the document. A legal statement signed by both Matteo and Sophia. "I agreed to uphold the marriage contract with Lena Carter for 6 months, regardless of her consent, in exchange for full inheritance rights and a transfer of funds to Kyle." She felt like she couldn't breathe. Matteo had said he didn't know she'd been tricked, that he believed she was the chosen bride. But this, it proved he knew she didn't want this, and kept her anyway. That night, Lena confronted Matteo in the living room. The chandelier cast light across his face as he walked in, still in his suit, eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Lena," he said, stepping toward her to embrace her. "Are you okay?" She threw the folder onto the table, hands shaking. "Read it, Matteo, and tell me it isn't true." Matteo picked up the documents, his face hardening as he read. "Lena, I can explain." "Explain?" she cut in, tears spilling. "You told me you didn't know I was tricked, but you signed this. You knew Kyle sold me. The hugs, the kisses, the nights we shared were just part of your plan to secure your inheritance, weren't they?" Matteo moved toward her, trying to take her hand, but Lena stepped back. "Lena, please listen," he said, voice urgent. "I signed it because my mother forced me. She told me if I broke the contract, you'd lose everything. Your career, your reputation. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't say anything because I love you, and I was scared of losing you." Lena shook her head, tears streaming down. "Protecting me? You kept me like a prisoner, Matteo. I trusted you. After Kyle, after everything. But you lied. I was just another piece in your game." Matteo stood frozen, pain written all over his face. "Lena, you're not a piece. You're the one person I'd give everything up for." She turned away, voice choked. "I need time, Matteo. I can't be here right now." She ran to her room, slamming the door shut. That night, she looked at the ring she had designed for Matteo, the piece that brought her global acclaim. It had once symbolized love, but now only reminded her of betrayal. The next day, Lena made her decision. She would leave the villa, just days before the 6-month contract ended. She couldn't stay, couldn't face Matteo or Sophia. She packed her things and left the ring on the table with a note. "Thank you for everything, but I can't stay." Rosa tried to stop her, but Lena shook her head, tears falling. "I have to go, Rosa. I don't know who I can trust anymore." As she stepped out the gates, she turned to look back at the villa. Matteo stood on the balcony, watching her, but he didn't chase after her. Lena turned away, heart shattering, not knowing this choice would change both of them forever. In his office, Matteo sat staring at the contract Luca had exposed, knowing it was a move designed to tear them apart. The agreement was real, yes, but he had signed it thinking he was protecting Lena, not deceiving her. The pain of seeing her leave was unbearable. He couldn't just sit there. He took the Moretti family contract and tore it in half. Then he picked up the phone and called his lawyer. "Cancel every clause tied to the inheritance," he said firmly. "I don't want the estate. I only want her." The lawyer was stunned. "Mr. Matteo, you'll lose the vineyard, the villa, the Moretti legacy." Matteo stared out the window where Lena had disappeared. "I've already lost what matters most. The rest means nothing." He picked up the ring Lena had left behind, holding it tightly in his palm. She no longer trusted him, but he would prove his love. Not for the contract, not for the family, but for Lena, the woman who had changed everything. New York greeted Lena with its noisy streets, neon lights, and relentless pace, but she felt more lost than ever. After leaving the Moretti villa, she returned to her small Brooklyn apartment, once a cozy nest she shared with Kyle. Everything was still the same, the blue sofa, the bookshelf stacked with fashion magazines. But Lena was no longer the carefree woman she had once been. Tuscany had changed her, and Matteo, he had left behind a void she couldn't fill. She threw herself into her work, opening her first jewelry boutique in Manhattan, riding the wave of fame from the Florence Award. Lena Carter Designs quickly gained traction, with collections inspired by the Tuscan vineyards and delicate, intricate patterns. The press hailed her as the rising star of modern jewelry. But every night after locking up, Lena would sit alone, stare at her creations, and think of the ring she had left behind for Matteo. She wondered if she had been wrong to walk away. But the memory of the secret agreement, the fact that Matteo knew she hadn't consented and still kept her, cut like a knife. The hugs, the kisses, the burning nights. Were they real or just part of the plan? One rainy afternoon, while Lena was adjusting the display, the doorbell rang. She looked up, and her heart stopped. Kyle stood there, dressed in a crisp suit, eyes filled with regret. "Lena," he said, voice hoarse, "I need to talk to you." Lena crossed her arms, trying to stay calm. "Kyle, I was clear in Tuscany. We're done." Kyle walked in without waiting for an invitation. "I know I messed up. I shouldn't have let you fall into that contract. But the company is stable now, and I realized I can't live without you." He dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring box. "Lena Carter, marry me. This time it's real." Lena stared at him, the man she once loved, who had promised her a future. But now she saw only a selfish man who had sold her out for his own gain. She shook her head firmly. "No, Kyle, you don't love me. You love the idea of me, the perfect life you could control. But I'm not that girl anymore." Kyle stood, anger flickering in his eyes. "You're saying no because of that Moretti guy, aren't you? You think he loves you? Lena, he kept you for an inheritance, just like I did." Lena's hands clenched, but her voice stayed steady. "Maybe Matteo made mistakes, but he never looked at me like I was something to own. Goodbye, Kyle." She opened the door and motioned for him to leave. Kyle stepped outside without looking back. When the door closed, Lena sank into a chair, tears falling. Turning down Kyle was the right choice, but she couldn't deny her heart still longed for Tuscany, for Matteo, the man she once believed was love, now a painful memory. Weeks passed, and Lena's store was busier than ever. One day, while helping a customer, the doorbell rang again. She looked up, and the world stopped spinning. Matteo stood in the doorway. No suit this time, just a soft blue button-down and jeans. He looked different, more grounded, more real, but those deep brown eyes still made her pulse race. "Lena," he said, voice warm and low, "I need to talk to you." Lena took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Matteo, what are you doing here? The contract is over." Matteo stepped inside, eyes never leaving hers. "I know. I signed the annulment, Lena. Legally, we're no longer bound, but my heart, it's still yours." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring she had designed, the one she'd left at the villa. "You left this," he said, voice rough, "and I couldn't live without bringing it back to you." Lena shook her head, tears welling. "Mateo, I can't. You knew I didn't consent, and you still signed that agreement with your mother. You kept me for the inheritance. How can I believe any of it? Those hugs, those kisses, those nights was real?" Mateo stepped closer, his eyes filled with pain but unwavering. "Lena, I was wrong to sign that contract. My mother pressured me. She said if I didn't follow through, you'd lose everything. Your career, your reputation. I thought I was protecting you, but I didn't tell you because I love you, and I was scared of losing you. Every moment we shared, our first kiss, every night together, it was real, I swear." Lena looked at him, heart torn. She wanted to believe him, but the pain from Kyle, from the contract, still lingered. "Then why are you here, Mateo? To apologize?" Mateo shook his head and pulled out a crumpled document, the Moretti family contract, torn in two. "I destroyed the contract, Lena. I gave up the inheritance, the vineyard, everything. I don't want it if I don't have you. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to ask, will you start over with me? No contracts, no schemes, just us." Lena blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. She looked at the ring in his hand, the one she had poured her heart into to honor him, and remembered the moments in Tuscany, the laughter in the kitchen, the moonlight in the vineyard, his arms around her. She stepped forward, touched his hand, her voice trembling. "Mateo, I'm scared. I'm scared of getting hurt again." Mateo held her hand and placed the ring gently in her palm. "I'm scared too, Lena, but I'd rather face that fear than live a life without you." Lena looked into his eyes and for the first time saw a truth with no shadow of doubt. She smiled through her tears and slid the ring onto her finger. "Okay, Moretti, let's start over. But this time, no contracts, no lies." Mateo pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, as if to erase every trace of pain. Lena kissed him back, feeling her heart open again. They didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, they knew they had found each other, not by fate, but by choice. Chapter 8, The Second Vow. Autumn returned to Tuscany, bringing with it golden sunlight and the gentle scent of lavender in the breeze. Lena stood before the mirror in a small room of the Moretti estate, adjusting the wedding dress she had designed herself. The white silk gown gracefully embraced her figure, adorned with intricate vine embroidery, a tribute to the vineyard where she and Mateo had found each other. No longer the uncertain bride of 6 months prior, Lena now smiled at her reflection, her heart filled with hope and love. After Mateo appeared at her jewelry store in New York, bringing the ring she had left behind and a promise to start anew, Lena returned to Tuscany with him. They spent the following weeks healing their wounds. No contracts, no schemes. Mateo shared his struggles with his mother, Sophia, his refusal of the inheritance, and his choice to live authentically. Lena opened up about her fear of being hurt, but admitted she had never stopped thinking about him. His eyes under the moonlight, his embrace during passionate nights, and his laughter when they burned the Italian pasta. Today in the Moretti vineyard, they would exchange vows, not because of fate or schemes, but because of the love they had chosen. The vineyard was decorated simply yet warmly, with white ribbons draped over the rows of vines, wooden tables adorned with lavender flowers, and Moretti wine. Only a few close individuals were present. Rosa, the ever-supportive housekeeper, Giovanni, Matteo's grandfather, who smiled proudly, and a few friends from Florence. There were no lawyers, no contracts, only pure love. Lena stepped out, her wedding dress shimmering under the sunlight. Matteo stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in a deep blue suit, his eyes locked onto her as if she were his entire world. As she approached, he took her hand and whispered, "Lena, you are more beautiful than my dreams." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Don't make me cry before the vows, Moretti." The ceremony was brief but filled with emotion. They wrote their own vows, each word a heartfelt promise. Lena spoke, her voice trembling. "Matteo, I once thought love was a dangerous game, but you taught me it's worth the risk. I choose you, not just today, but every day from now on. Mateo looked at her, his eyes glistening. Lena, our first marriage was fate's doing. This time, it's my heart's choice. I promise to love, protect, and make you laugh, even if it means burning pasta for the rest of our lives. Laughter erupted from those around them. As they exchanged rings, the one Lena had designed, now a true symbol of their love, Mateo pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss. His lips were warm and intense, conveying everything words could not. Lena responded, her hands running through his hair, feeling their hearts beat in unison. The guests applauded, but for them, the world had faded away, leaving only each other. The reception took place under the setting sun, with the soft strains of a violin and spontaneous dances among the vines. Lena and Mateo remained inseparable, hand in hand, their eyes filled with passion. When a slow song played, Mateo led her to the center of the vineyard, wrapping his arms around her waist. They swayed together, Lena resting her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. You know, she whispered, I used to hate this vineyard. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Mateo leaned down, kissing her cheek. And I can't imagine my life without you, Lena. He pulled her closer, their lips meeting in a slow kiss that reignited the flames of their passionate nights. Lena responded, her body pressed against his, and in that moment, they forgot everything. The past, the pain, leaving only love. As the music ended, Mateo whispered in her ear, Come with me. I want it to be just the two of us. Lena smiled, nodding, and they quietly left the celebration, hand in hand, heading toward a small wooden cabin at the edge of the vineyard. A surprise Mateo had prepared for their wedding night. The cabin was illuminated by candlelight, the scent of pine and lavender mingling in the air. Lena stepped inside, amazed by the scene. A bed covered in white silk sheets, a small table with a bottle of wine, and a window overlooking the vineyard shimmering under the moonlight. Mateo, she whispered, turning to him, when did you do all this? He smiled, closing the door and embracing her from behind. I wanted tonight to be just us, Lena. No contracts, no past. Just you and me. He kissed her neck, his warm breath sending shivers down her spine. Lena turned, pulling him into a deep kiss, her lips exploring his with unhidden desire. His hands glided down her back, gently untying the dress, letting the silk fall to the floor. They fell onto the bed, their bodies entwined in the soft candlelight. Mateo kissed every inch of her, from her shoulders to her chest, each touch igniting a flame within her. Lena responded, her hands caressing his back, pulling him closer, whispering his name amidst their rapid breaths. That night they made love with intense passion, yet with the tenderness of two souls reunited after enduring pain. Their bodies merged, not just in desire, but in a silent promise never to part again. As the moonlight faded, Lena lay in Mateo's arms, her head resting on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Mateo, she whispered playfully, if this is how you plan to apologize forever, I might just forgive you endlessly. Mateo chuckled, kissing her forehead. I'll apologize for a lifetime, Lena, as long as I get to wake up beside you every day. In the days following their wedding, Lena and Mateo embarked on their new life together. They decided to stay in Tuscany, transforming the small wooden cabin into their home, even though Mateo had relinquished his inheritance and the grand estate. Lena continued designing jewelry, opening a small workshop in Florence, while Mateo managed a modest vineyard, living simply yet happily. Though Sofia was furious about Mateo's decision to forego the family fortune, she could do nothing as Giovanni supported his grandson's choice. One evening as they sat outside their vineyard sipping wine, Lena leaned on Mateo's shoulder, gazing at the stars. You know, she said, I used to think fate played a cruel trick on us, but now I believe it led us to the right place. Mateo took her hand, slipping the ring she had designed back onto her finger. Fate may have started it, Lena, but we wrote this ending ourselves. They kissed under the moonlight, a sweet yet fiery kiss, affirming that no matter how the world changed, their love would remain steadfast forever.